Hello everyone, Todd here, Todd Yates with my Practicum project report for HI 7095. So a quick overview of Hello all, Todd here, Todd Yates with my Practicum project report for HI 7095. And a quick look at what we're going to cover today. So we'll start out with some objectives, or what were our intentions and goals. Then a little background and description, or why were we doing this project. Project rationale, reasons for doing the project from views of different stakeholders. Look at our methodology and how we did what we did. A check on the results, what were our outcomes. A look at the deliverables, what did we deliver to make sure value was obtained. Look at how the objectives of the program, the UC MHI program, were met, and how did the project use those MHI objectives. And then I've got some closing remarks. So, looking at our objectives. The project chosen for the practicum was to implement a computerized physician order entry system, a CPOE, for the dentist to which the student, myself, has a 20-plus year professional relationship. Her name is Dr. Kathy Mansell. DMD, MAGD are her credentials, and she owns Mansell Dentistry in Scottsdale, Arizona. The dental office currently uses the Dentrix practice management software, and the goal was to implement the CPOE module that best suited the current office setup. And that setup was determined during the discovery phase of the project. The Dentrix electronic health records system has been in use at the practice for many years and is the essential tool that runs the business. The system also has some key security features that will be explored to ensure proper setup and use. And the office network is simple yet secure. And if we look at a diagram, so this diagram showing the network shows a simple router slash firewall at the internet edge, a single Windows server that runs the server-based Dentrix software in addition to hosting the database. A simple switch connects each of the 8 clients in the office to the server, and although it's not displayed here on this diagram, there is also wireless access throughout the office and also a guest net login. Back to our objectives here. Mansell Dentistry has been operating in Scottsdale, Arizona for over 25 years. It's a small practice with one licensed dentist and a small staff of hygienists and administrative staffers. And the system that the office has been using for many years is, as I said, called Dentrix, which produces practice management software with several modules that can be implemented as needed. The module chosen for this project is the CPOE module, one of many that can be implemented. Others include online payment, called Dentrix Pay, customer billing, called Quick Bill, and claims, called simply enough e-claims, among others. So as a student, I approached Dr. Mansell in the spring of 2017 with an inquiry about any technical projects that may have been desired, and Dr. Mansell came up with the idea of implementing a computerized provider order entry system. Preliminary research showed that a reasonable amount of work would need to be devoted to implementing the CPOE module, not including training and enabling the non-technical members of the administrative staff to either support themselves or to be able to find the proper channel for support should they need it. Due to the critical nature of the Dentrix system to the practice, particular attention will have to be paid to testing the system once the CPOE module is implemented, along with proper training and support for the rather non-technical staff. Now, while the staff is very capable in the use of the Dentrix system, the underlying technology can be difficult to understand without years of training and experience. And I feel that my IT experience, I have almost 15 years of IT project management experience, over the years, and the knowledge that I've gained through the MHI program enable me to take on this responsibility with more than adequate confidence of a successful outcome. A proposal presentation was delivered to Dr. Mansell and her business manager, Sheila Lesage, in October of 2017. As described, the presentation described what the Practicum project consists of, the roles involved, the expectations and participation, the costs for my participation, which was nothing, and a project timeline. With all in agreement that the project was possible and being approached with proper due diligence and professionalism, the decision was made to proceed. Sheila is also the designated preceptor for the project, as she is the subject matter expert for the business. Sheila has an excellent grasp of the business and the Dentrix system's use within the practice. So if we look at some background and description. The Practicum project will produce an outcome that is beneficial to both the dentist practice and its patients alike. There are myriad reasons for both to benefit. Research has shown, however, that a CPOE system is not necessarily a panacea in every case. Here we can explore both the benefits and detriments of a CPOE system, and in doing so we can model our training options to maximize the benefits and mitigate the detriments. Certainly some of the benefits of a CPOE system come from evidence-based outcomes of reduced errors and medication interactions that are widely known in the health IT press and literature. To be precise, let's look at an academic description of CPOE. CPOE systems offer complete and accurate drug information, automatic dose calculations, and appropriate clinical decision support at the point of care. Another excellent description comes from a tip sheet published to help organizations become compliant with the meaningful use guidelines of the Affordable Care Act. Use computerized provider order entry for medication orders directly entered by any licensed healthcare professional who can enter orders into the medical record per state, local, and professional guidelines. Some of the benefits of CPOE. The documentation exists. CPOE systems can provide enormous benefits, particularly when paired with the Computerized Decision Support System, or CDSS. One such publication noted about a CPOE study that one showed a 10-fold reduction in prescription errors themselves when CPOE was implemented. The reduction in prescription errors is without doubt a noble benefit of CPOE, but there are others. One study found that when considering preventable adverse drug events, PADES, implementing CPOE is associated with a greater than 50% decline in PADE rates in hospital-related settings. That same group study found changes in medication errors appear to be consistent across commercial and homegrown systems, with or without clinical decision support, and in individual units or hospital-wide implementations. Another obvious benefit to a CPOE is that it avoids the possibility of confusion or error due to readability of a prescribing physician's handwriting. Yet another benefit was noted. Another clear benefit is that CPOE decreased the time from pharmacy ordering to medication administration time. The same authors also noted that, likely because of timely availability of results and faster order processing, patients' hospital length of stay was shorter. An additional benefit also to be noted is that a patient returning to an organization participating in a shared electronic medical record system has their drug history at the ready. It only makes sense that a CPOE system's value would be derived from the underlying EHR on which it is reliant. The value of such EHRs is even recognized and espoused by the American Dental Association, the ADA. In a quote from the ADA website, EHR systems offer the potential to improve care quality and patient safety by enhancing both the quantity and quality of information available to providers for decision making. An EHR system's ability to capture detailed clinical information in a highly structured manner can enable analysis for quality assessment, identification of areas for improvement, and the design of decision support tools like allergy alerts, medication alerts, and other prompts. That same article goes on to say how an EHR could import and display relevant information from other dentists or providers, such as health history, health problems, and medication lists, which are very important for proper functioning of a CPOE system using the underlying EHR. Few drawbacks. As could be expected, CPOE systems are not purely beneficial. They can also have some drawbacks that cause issues with use or performance. The important part of this analysis is to mitigate the issues mentioned. Mitigation can be accomplished in several ways, but we intend to focus on training the users in the proper use of the CPOE system as our primary mitigation strategy. Of the issues noted, one study found that CPOE actually caused errors ranging from wrong dosing to duplication, many stemming from a hybrid paper CPOE workflow and from poor design decisions such as displaying pharmacy formulary availability rather than appropriate default dosing options. We are taking 2 steps to mitigate this type of issue. Number 1, proper training on the use of CPOE without a hybrid paper solution. Number 2, the CPOE module we have chosen is thoroughly vetted for quality and proper design. Other issues arose from what were termed well-meaningly programmed safety measures that prevented physicians from pre-ordering medication prior to the arrival of sick children by air transport, for instance, adding that nurses were unable to manually override the system when necessary, and that both the physicians and nurses were locked out of the same chart by the pharmacists who were editing, and that the terminals were too distant from the actual patients. Perhaps one of the most serious issues arose due to a change in the care environment at a foundational level. Researchers noted that an introduction of asynchrony between nurse and physician workflow and a corresponding reduction in direct face-to-face communication. This type of environmental behavior change could have serious consequences for teams of clinicians that had developed a rapport over time. Other negative effects included the increased time to enter orders, usability of the CPOE by clinicians without extensive computer training, and an effect on teamwork by changing communication channels and collaboration mechanisms. Those researchers also noted system availability and the human-computer interaction as issues impacting CPOE use. Yet another complaint against CPOE, particularly when paired with a CDSS, is one of alert fatigue, where users dismiss alerts just to be able to progress with the task at hand. One hurdle that we don't have to overcome at this particular practice is the negative aspects of adoption of an EHR or a CPOE at all. Some examples of implementations gone awry are due to paranoid providers who do not trust the system and back everything up on paper, but there are also the stubborn providers that do not trust the system and refuse to use it completely. Fortunately for our project, the provider and the support team are well prepared and trained on the Dentrix EHR. No additional cajoling will be necessary, as the practice has been using the system for many years, and adoption isn't an issue to deal with. A little bit about the rationale for the project. My interest in this project personally goes far beyond reaching the academic goal of completing the health informatics program. In my professional life, I'm an IT project manager for a Medicare payer and have not had the opportunity in the past to implement a project of this sort. I have intense curiosity about all things IT, so this presents me with another learning experience, and who knows, I may need a safe, accurate prescription someday from my dentist, and if I was able to have a part in ensuring that delivery of that prescription happened, I would feel proud that I was able to do so. Now, additional motivation comes from the practice itself having missed some of the meaningful use 1 and meaningful use 2 incentives for CPOE. Whether or not the ACA incentives may have been met for using the EHR in its full capacity is unknown. The incentives for CPOE use were certainly not met. This is a way to gain a measure of redemption for the practice itself as it sheds old norms and traditions using paper prescriptions, and since Dr. Mansell professes to, quote, do things the right way, unquote, it follows with her mantra and moves the technology forward. One last motivation for the practice is that Dr. Mansell wants to present an image to new and existing customers that the practice is progressive. This reflects not only on the administrative facets of the practice, excuse me, but also serves to reassure patients that the cutting-edge technologies and wisdom produced by the dental industry in general is being employed by Dr. Mansell. As with anyone in the business of any kind, if a customer sees them using cutting-edge technologies, for example, a salesperson with a tablet, it lends credence to the customer's belief that other aspects of the vendor's business are equally forward-thinking. I mean, who doesn't want to be on the bleeding edge of new and exciting technologies? Only the most conservative think that way, which can cause customers to bolt to technologically advanced vendors or providers to take advantage of their competitive upper hand. A leading communications company sums it up with this quote: small business owners are increasingly looking at these technology trends to figure out where their next move should be to increase brand awareness and customer reach. It makes sense in an increasingly technical world to appear knowledgeable and courageous enough to adopt new trends. A little bit about our methodology. From the project management point of view, the project methodology was tried and true waterfall, with each successive step coming to a gate review before the subsequent step began. The initial phase was discovery, where the foundation and basic knowledge of the system was investigated and documented. Discovery is also known as the analysis phase in a waterfall project. It is a key phase as it sets up the possibility of success in subsequent phases. A missed requirement from a key stakeholder in this phase can be disastrous down the road. It is key to involve all stakeholders and to gather the requirement from each of them prior to proceeding. Incidentally, the meaning of stakeholder isn't always apparent. Stakeholder, according to the definition by the Project Management Institute, or PMI, is someone who is an individual, group, or organization who may affect, be affected by, or perceive itself to be affected by a decision, activity, or outcome of a project. So an entity or individual who merely perceives themselves as a stakeholder, whether they actually hold a stake or not, can have an effect on a project, so it is wise to take time to clearly identify all who may fit this description. The discovery phase included gathering the requirements for the practice. It was important to document the existing process and then to show the to-be process so the practice could understand the proposed changes. Both processes can be found on the next slide. Actually, we have the as-is process here. So, as you can see, the dentist verbally requests the dental assistant to create the project or the prescription using Dentrix. The assistant opens the Dentrix Office Manager, which is the core module, selects the patient and medicine and dose through a series of drop-downs, and then prints out a hard copy of the prescription ready for Dr. Mansell's review and signature. It was also learned in this discovery phase that Dr. Mansell does not issue prescriptions for controlled substances, known as EPCS, or Electronic Prescribing of Controlled Substances. Most, if not all, of her prescriptions are for non-controlled substances like painkillers or antibiotics. The practice's philosophy is that any procedures requiring a stronger controlled type of prescription like an opioid painkiller would come from a referral partner like an oral surgeon. This approach greatly reduces risk for the practice and also results in much fewer prescriptions being written. To look at the to-be process. The 2B process will change that previous process in two significant ways. Number one, there will be no printed prescriptions that, if mishandled, could be forged. And number two, only the provider will be able to send a prescription to a pharmacy via electronic means by way of a secure password. This would be an important step toward lowering risk for the practice. So once discovery had been completed, the next step in a waterfall type project would be to begin the design phase. On a typical IT project, the project manager would sit with the business analyst and a subject matter expert from the business. Requirements are reviewed and alternative solutions are determined using a process such as brainstorming or best practice investigations. In many cases, sources such as Gartner's Magic Quadrant can be useful in determining correctness of fit. But that is typically done at the EHR level, not at the granular level of one module within the EHR. If you're not familiar with Gartner's Magic Quadrant, picture a box divided into 4 quadrants. The lower left quadrant is the weakest and least sophisticated. The upper right quadrant is the strongest and most sophisticated quadrant, and you would want your product placed in that magic upper right quadrant. So fortunately for us, the vendor, Dentrix, provided 4 different options for us to choose from. There's, like I said, there's 4 different flavors of module from Dentrix that are flexible enough to accommodate variations in any practice and even the providers within that practice. The 4 options are Easy Dental ePrescribe, Henry Schein ePrescribe standalone, ePrescribe app for mobile devices, and Dentrix ePrescribe. Easy Dental ePrescribe is described by Dentrix support as the first ePrescribe offering from the company that is now being deprecated but is still in use in some offices. Henry Schein ePrescribe, the maker, and Henry Schein is the maker of Dentrix, also has a standalone module for dentists that use a different EHR than Dentrix. For the modern on-the-go dentist, there is also the mobile app, aptly named ePrescribe app. Dr. Mansell is rather conservative, though, and chose to go with the now mainstream product, Dentrix ePrescribe. The next step after design is deployment or implementation. The Dentrix ePrescribe module comes with very detailed step-by-step instructions on implementation. Now, as an IT project manager, I'm used to having my teams implement upgrades, changes, or new installations of software and functionality into a test or development environment that mirrors the production environment. In a test or dev environment, teams can work out bugs and perform several types of tests on new software functionality. Now, the types of tests that we normally run and that we were anticipating being run for this implementation are unit testing. That's where the testing of the new software or functionality for its requirements only. Does the software or functionality do what it's supposed to do, with the border of testing being the software or functionality itself? The next typical step in testing is regression testing. And that's where we ask the question, does adding the software or functionality change or adversely affect the surrounding system? In this case, that would be the Dentrix EHR. So we would regression test the EHR and make sure that none of the other functions were affected adversely by our implementation of the CPOE. The next type of testing typically done in a project is stress testing. Can we break or degrade the system through vigorous activity by many users in the office, or by entering unexpected data into fields that are not designed to accept bogus values? An example of unexpected data into fields might include something like entering a malicious SQL command into a data entry field to see if the database could be hacked into giving up PHI, protected health information, which would be a serious HIPAA violation. Finally, the last testing step is system testing. So We ask the question, does the new software functionality change or adversely affect the system as a whole? And in this case, the system is the practice. So the day-to-day activities of the practice, would they change? That's kind of the point of the project. We hope it does. Does it adversely affect it? We hope it does not. So those were the types of tests we had intended to perform and that were included in the project plan submitted with the project proposal. What we had not anticipated was that Dentrix, having been around since 1989, has a vested interest in making implementation of their products as simple as possible. Dentrix had performed all the tests above on untold occasions as their product developed over the years, and has delivered a solution that involved only a simple test prescription to be sent at the conclusion of implementation. Now, while that was good news for the nerves of the dentist and the office manager, it also shaved about 40 hours of effort off the project, which was not good news for the Practicum author, me. Get back to the implementation. Let's look at some of the preparation that was required as we got ready to perform the actual steps to enable the CPOE module. The ePrescribe setup guide is 18 pages long and is downloadable from the Dentrix website or at the URL on the screen. The guide starts with 3 sections to prepare the actual sit-down session to implement the module. The first of the 3 sections is titled What to Expect, and it sets expectations for time allotment for different steps in the implementation. One thing I learned as I progressed through the steps of the implementation is that the assumption had to have been made when Dentrix wrote this section that the person performing the tasks had intimate knowledge of the practice and unlimited immediate access to the dentist and the business manager. In reality, the actual time spent in front of the computer was easily 4 to 5 times of the Dentrix estimate of 2.5 hours. A lot of time had to be spent contemplating the impact of changes to the business that required explanation in non-technical terms to the dentist and business manager as they performed their day-to-day duties in what was clearly a bit of a hectic environment. That took time, a lot in some cases, but was absolutely necessary. One of these issues that popped up was that the technician who had set up the Dentrix system had employed rather lax security. So each user did have to sign in to Dentrix for some role-based access controls, but the users were only asked to supply a simple password. There is an actual setting just to enable passwords, so it could be possible to allow users into the system without passwords at all if this selection were not checked. But due to the possibility that the ePrescribe module could possibly be used for illicit means, Dentrix imposes a requirement for secure passwords when the module is implemented. That means that those simple passwords in use by the staff and provider today would have to meet some fairly stringent new standards. Those standards can be, as such, a minimum of 8 characters long, at least 1 each upper and lowercase letter, at least 1 number, and at least 1 symbol, such as a $sign, ampersand, or exclamation point. Being in IT and knowing the impact such a requirement can have on the day-to-day activities of users, I approached the issue carefully. I wrote out an email to the preceptor, Sheila, explaining the requirements along with some advice on how to create complex passwords that are still easily rememberable. The advice is this: rather than think of a word with numbers and a symbol thrown in, think of a phrase that should be easy to remember. Such a phrase might consist of a short sentence like, "My daughter's pet is Sparky." That would be easily remembered and, when the requirements are applied to it, nearly impossible to guess. For instance, one could translate the phrase into the password MYDPET155PARKY exclamation point, or "My D pet is Sparky." Once this was explained to the dentist and the rationale behind it, plus the fact that I've heard her intimate over the years that her office does things the right way, she opted in to the secure password requirement. The next section is titled Things You'll Need. and covers the foundational basics, like the computer and browser release level license identifiers and a cell phone that can receive text messages. That last requirement about the cell phone that can receive text messages was interpreted as a good sign that some sort of multi-factor authentication was going to take place during the implementation to prevent a bad actor from implementing any functionality for nefarious means in nefarious ways, like perhaps hacking into the practice's Wi-Fi network from an empty office next door. The specific license information that was needed were the provider's DEA license, the Drug Enforcement Agency license, the practitioner's NPI, the National Provider Identifier Number, and lastly, the state-issued license to practice number was required. All three pieces of information were readily supplied by the office manager and Practicum preceptor, Sheila Lesage. The final section on the first page of the setup instructions is titled Prerequisites. It has the user implementer ensure the version of Dentrix is 15.2.239.0 or higher, and it was. Version 16.4.91.0 was installed. It next instructs the implementer to enable secure passwords, a step that I as implementer thought erroneously was unimportant and chose to revisit only if necessary, which it turned out to be exactly that, necessary. Next, the implementer is prompted to enter or check for completeness the practice information and provider details. A screenshot of the provider details screen with full names of the providers and staff redacted is shown on the next slide. And it is from this dialog window that the implementer enters the data collected previously. That data includes the practice's generic administrative email address, the aforementioned DEA license number, and the format of that number is alpha alpha and then 7 numbers. The DEA schedule, which had already been entered previously, the state license ID number, and that has the format of 4 single-digit numbers, that state license expiration date, and the provider's NPI, National Provider Identifier, in the format of 10 consecutive numbers. The next step to activate ePrescribe is the one that would actually accomplish the project's goal. It is also, unfortunately, the step that proved to bring the project to a halt. During the vetting of the solution, there is no mention of additional costs for adding modules, so one could assume, and both the dentist and I did, that the monthly subscription fee to Dentrix covers the additional modules. That assumption proved to be an error. Discovering this gave me pause to inform the dentist and to obtain her approval before proceeding. As previously mentioned, the practice writes very few prescriptions, and all are for non-controlled substances. The initial setup cost of $150 plus additional subscription costs of $35 per month were something that the practice was not willing to take on based on the light use that the module would get once implemented. The difficult decision was made to halt the project. Lessons were learned for sure, the most painful of which was to always investigate all possible costs associated to a solution. Now, the vendor doesn't put that information front and center in order to perhaps prevent providers from getting cold feet prior to even starting the implementation and getting as far as we did. However, that is no excuse for not doing more thorough research into the solution prior to starting the implementation. Other lessons learned was seeing the dentist office from the back of the house perspective instead of as the customer I've been for 20 plus years. It all appears so calm on the surface when viewed from the hygienist chair, but there's a lot going on that makes it appear so when it is really bustling and busy. I now also know what regulations are in place to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse of CPOE systems, and there are also myriad modules that can enhance the functionality of Dentrix, such as a payment module that enables online bill payment. This solution also could be included at additional cost, which differed based on how Dentrix was set up in the initial implementation, but was deemed unnecessary for the way the office runs today. Finally, being able to work hands-on with the Dentrix EHR was very special, especially for an IT fan at heart, like myself. So the results, the project, despite all of the promise and enthusiasm of the participants, ultimately ended with disappointment. Some worthwhile lessons were learned and usable knowledge gained, but that didn't provide the dentist's office with any value. So, in order to provide at least a modicum of value, and at the suggestion of Dr. Wanjia Anderson, I undertook an effort to find other solutions to CPOE systems that might be considered by the dentist. A scaled-down request for proposal, RFP, was considered, but with limited time there was a sizable risk that it wouldn't complete before the end of the semester. I run a lot of RFPs as part of my job and understand the process and risks very well, and it is very common for vendors to overpromise and underdeliver on an RFP timeline. Having only about 1 month left to complete the project, the decision was made that a full RFP, or even a scaled-down one, was too much of a risk. However, that didn't mean that some hard work and scrambling couldn't provide some information for the dentist to consider going forward. The solutions investigated, main features of each, and of course the costs, were prepared as a deliverable and are detailed in the next section. That section was delivered as a separate deliverable to the practice in order to provide a measure of value going forward if there is another opportunity to take on the functionality of a CPOE module. In the past, the practice considered taking on another provider, and while that eventually didn't work out, there was always the possibility that it could happen in the future. The deliverable is presented over the next few slides. As explained previously, the project was unable to attain its original goal, but there's still value to be had in the effort. While this project will come to an end, there is no reason not to leave some artifact that can provide value in the future to Dr. Mansell's practice. For that reason, we've conducted a market analysis of CPOE vendors, listing some of their features and pricing models. It is our sincere wish that this may provide some measure of value to the practice in the future. As with most research projects, it's wise to start with a Google search. Searching on the term standalone CPOE systems brings up no dearth of results, but the knowledge source for the top couple results points to this page, and you see the URL for that page there. Now, clicking that link takes the user to a page that displays a report name, and that name is Global Computerized Physician Order Entry Systems - Information Technology, and is published by Report Buyer. It's a 158-page report published in February of 2017 and purports to have the ultimate analysis of around 60 worldwide companies in the CPOE space. It is also not free, and at $4,500 per one user license doesn't fit the budget of this project. What it does list in the table of contents is not the analysis of the companies, but rather the company names, which are free to browse. Taking that information at the very least leads us in the right direction for our own analyses based on a bit of hard work. The companies and solutions that would possibly work for Dr. Mansell's practice are listed in the subsequent slides. So first we come across ePrescribe Basic, which is manufactured by Allscripts here in the United States. Some of its features are that it does instant checks on drug interactions, dosage levels, patient-specific factors including prior adverse reactions. Patient information is protected by privacy and security measures, and this includes prescriber authentication. And it's reliable and cost-effective integration through web portal access. Up to the recording of this presentation, we've made 3 attempts to contact the sales office at Allscripts to secure pricing information and have been unsuccessful so far. But one thing, in order to provide value for the dentist's office, I make a pledge that I am going to continue even after the end of this semester to pursue that pricing information and supply that to the dentist's office. Another product known as Orders Management and CPOE by Halfpenny Technologies, again here in the U.S., all companies here in the U.S. Some of its features are orders and results exchanged through software as a service-based hub technology, consolidated clinical test results as structured data into EMRs, and its pricing model is interesting. There is no charge to the sender, which is the provider. It's actually the recipient that pays the fees. So whether you're sending prescriptions to a pharmacy or images to a specialist, there's no cost to the provider. It's the recipient that pays the fees. So interesting payment model, and that's one that could certainly be of interest to the dentist's office. Good value there. The next is called Patient Keeper, created by Patient Keeper Inc. here in the U.S. It's a full-featured native mobile app for iOS and Android devices that lets physicians access and act on information anytime, anywhere. And it's got a unique overlay architecture that integrates with the hospital's current systems and preserves existing an organization's existing IT investments. So it could sit on top of the Dentrix EHR, apparently. Now, as with all scripts, we've made 3 attempts to date to contact Patient Keeper sales with no success, but the same pledge holds. We'll keep trying until we do get that information, make sure that we pass it along to Dr. Mansell. Now, the next 2 slides contain the Easy Dental ePrescribe, if you remember. That's the solution which the project was originally intended to implement. And it's provided here just for cost comparison purposes only. We already know that this solution has been deemed too expensive for the practice, and it should be noted, however, that Dentrix and Henry Schein both rely on the Allscripts solution presented above for the backbone of their solution. So it'd be interesting to see what the Allscripts pricing structure actually looks like. The last one that we have here is Henry Schein standalone, and it's I think, as we mentioned before, this is the standalone version and is basically on the market in the case that you're not using Dentrix as the underlying EHR, that you have a different manufacturer's EHR and would like a CPOE module that doesn't necessarily integrate into it. So the companies below were also listed in the report as being in the CPOE space, but for various reasons were not viable contenders for consideration for Dr. Mansell's practice. There were various reasons for their disqualification. Some had too big of an offering, others were just off the mark as per the requirement of Dr. Mansell's practice. The company names and reasons for exclusion I've listed below. Cerner Corporation. Cerner doesn't offer a standalone CPOE. Their CPOE is integrated into their very robust EHR that they do offer. Clinicomp International. Clinicomp markets a full EHR with an integrated CPOE function. While not as robust as Cerner's, it's a lot more than what Dr. Mansell's office needs. eClinicalWorks, they offer a clinical decision support system that's kind of a superset of a CPOE, so a bit much for what our requirement was. Next product is called EDIMS, and it's manufactured or produced by Envision Physician Services. They're the maker of EDIMS, and it does not offer a standalone CPOE. IBM only has a full EMR, electronic medical record offering, much too much for our purposes. McKesson was mentioned, but McKesson was actually purchased by Allscripts, and McKesson markets the Allscripts CPOE solution. So we are already testing that one. Product called Medical Information Technology. That company partners with Patient Keeper, who is, if you remember, in the choices for consideration above. MedSphere Systems Corporation. MedSphere's focus appears to be on implementing large CPOE systems for big companies and organizations like the VA. It doesn't appear that they have a product, they just implement other products for large organizations. NetSmart Technologies was also named. Now, NetSmart focuses on EHRs specifically for human services and post-acute care, not really suitable for a dentist's office. Quadramed Corporation, and Quadramed focuses on patient identification and reduction of duplicate EHR entries, so not really in the CPOE space as we saw it. The Shams Group, they focus on hospital-centric EHRs only, so not really in our sweet spot. VisualMed Clinical Solutions, their CPOE is integrated into their patient record solution, but oddly enough, they don't even appear to have a website, so we're not too sure of the robustness of that company, so we stayed away from them. So objectives that were met. A significant objective met was outcome 1 from our syllabus. It stated demonstrate knowledge in healthcare and health information technology, and health data analytics in order to impact healthcare efficiency and population. Now, my project touched on several of the courses in the program, most notably Project Management, HI 7050, and Health Informatics, HI 7010. Now, implementing a CPOE required an understanding of the EHR as a whole, in addition to the contributions and complications that a CPOE implementation can bring about. Such contributions apply the tools and techniques from health information systems that can have an impact on the health of Dr. Mansell's patients, which is also outcome 2 from the syllabus. Now, had this project been undertaken back in 2011, it would have had a financial impact to Dr. Mansell's practice in that it would have allowed her to qualify for Meaningful Use 1 and Meaningful Use 2 incentives for CPOE use as part of the Affordable Care Act. Since that window was missed, there was little opportunity for the project to have much beneficial financial impact to the practice. There wasn't really significant policy or legal issues other than the DEA license proof as required by Outcome 3 in the syllabus. Now, Outcome 4 from the syllabus asks us about evidence-based application. This project would be backed by the contributions of a CPOE that have been proven from evidence-based outcomes to reduce prescription error and loss of efficiency from a paper-based system. Outcome 5 asks us about leadership, which I believe was absolutely necessary in this project. In one instance, I had to lead the non-technical staff to accomplish what we did get accomplished. They had to trust that I would work in a responsible manner with protected health information while also protecting the stability of the system. They also had to trust in me to adhere to all applicable HIPAA requirements. In another instance, Dr. Mansell had to demonstrate her leadership with tough decisions to do it the right way, with the strong password issue as an example. We were on track to accomplish our goal of implementing a working CPOE system, but learned a valuable lesson along the way. Costs must be known by all stakeholders up front, even in rather small projects such as this one. The ultimate decision was that the cost-benefit ratio wasn't in line with the wishes of the practice was a tough one to make. It didn't keep us from using the technical knowledge and proper project management techniques that would have made the project succeed and be an example of Outcome 6, however. Some closing thoughts. Thoughts on the project and its outcome. Certainly it was a disappointment, but we still feel that we were able to add value for the dentist's office and the practice through our efforts. We would have loved to have achieved the stated goal, but we did learn a lot about, in particular, the clinical dynamics and workflow. I work in a healthcare-based setting, but it's much just like an office-based environment. But to be actually in the mix as people are, going about their clinical duties and seeing, what goes on behind the scenes. That was very eye-opening and certainly kind of changes my perspective on what I do from an IT standpoint and what the downstream effect is for people who use the products that myself and my team produce. Um, Finally, one of the biggest rewards I personally take away from the project is learning another EHR. I love IT. That's why I've been an IT project manager for so many years. It's fascinating to learn the new technologies, and there is never a shortage of that coming down the road. So always a feeling of reward for being able to learn a new technology or a new piece of software, and so that personally was very rewarding for me. I also have some thoughts on the MHI program in general. Now, I don't want to come off as a bragger, but this is my second master's degree. My first comes from my undergrad alma mater, Arizona State. It was in information management, and the cost of that master's degree, and it was online also, was almost twice what the UC tuition and books cost. And in the ASU program, there were more than a couple of the courses that I thought personally lacked integrity. So I did a lot of homework before I selected UC for the MHI Health Informatics program. And my first comment about the differences between the programs is UC's immeasurably more valuable. Like you said, the tuition was not nearly as much as Arizona State, and there was only really one course that I thought lacked integrity, and I'm not going to throw them under the bus by stating which course in my presentation. I'll save that for the course evaluation. But yeah, I found the experience at UC very rewarding, cost effective, and a good value. And I feel like of the two master's programs, this one was by far superior, and is very well run, and I'm just very happy with it. So I want to thank you very much for listening to my presentation, and I'm going to pause the slides here so that if you'd like, you can take a screenshot and get the references. I believe I've got 3 slides of references. There's one. Page 2 there. And finally, our final page of references. And like I said, thank you very much for watching my presentation, and Godspeed. Take care.